Yes, you will. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Today we have two items on the agenda. Initially we'll have a presentation that relates to HAPSI. Donna Phaneuf is here with us today, and she will partner with Frank Duke on that presentation. And then also, I believe you received a note last week about the Hampton Roads Sanitation District and a study that came out. We did not have an opportunity to brief the council, so today Kristen Lynch will give you an update of our recommendation to the council related to that study. But before I turn it back over to you, Mayor and Council, what I would like to do is recognize some members of Team Norfolk with some very good news last week we received, and that's an upgrade from S&P. So out of the three rating agencies, both Fitch and S&P have the city one notch below the highest rating that you can have in terms of your bond rating, and we still are working on Moody's. We're 2 notches away from the highest rating there. But I would like to recognize members of the team that accompanied me to New York. That's Sabrina Joy Hogg, and we also had Ron Williams, Darrell Hill. We also had Christine Garzinski, Walter Johnson, and Alice Kelly. So a heavy lift. A heavy lift. We got on their turf and put up a pretty good fight. So I'm very, very proud of the team. But more importantly, it's an effort across the city. One of the things they recognize is the actions of the council in terms of approving the long-term financial policies, as well as the willingness to work on the revenue side of the equation too. So it was kudos for the entire city, and we're very proud. I'm very proud of the team and the accomplishments. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, well, thanks for mentioning all their names, and on behalf of the city council, I want to express our thanks and gratitude for a great job. I was here one time when I got a phone call from the manager saying we've been downgraded, and this phone call was a lot better. So, but it took a lot of work and a lot of, intense work. I know. So I just want to thank you for all of that. Rating agencies never treat us fairly. Never, because they don't understand the military. They don't understand a lot of things about Norfolk. But this time it looks like you were able to communicate some of the good things that are happening here. So we appreciate that, Marcus. And congratulations to you too.
I mentioned to Mr. Burford a few minutes ago that Standard & Poor's is the same rating agency that downgraded the United States of America last year.
That's right.
So we must be doing something.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so thanks, Marcus. I don't know, maybe somebody can find out, but we may be among the 3 agencies. And we haven't, Fitch has only been grading us
10 years.
for 10, 12 years, something like that. It'd be interesting to see on the big picture, is this maybe our best position in bond ratings yet? So, okay. Hi, Terry. Well, we're going to move directly to the HAPSI presentation because we got some guests here as well, and Bart's got to leave here at 3:15. So if we have any council concerns, we'll try to pick them up later on. So, hi, Donna.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you being there. The other members of the HAPSI Commission and good friends as well. So, Manager, you want to begin, or how do you want to do this?
We'll go right to the presentation. Right.
Madam Chairman, I didn't know if you had any comments you wanted to make
I sure do.
before I began.
I absolutely would. I have a nice little introduction for Marcus and staff members and city council. So I'd like to go through that first and then turn it over to Frank to take over. Just a little introduction here. My name is Donna Phaneuf. I'm the president of VIA Design Architects, an architectural firm located here in downtown Norfolk. We are a architectural firm specializing in waterfront and urban redevelopment, which has led to my involvement in this committee, of which I have chaired for the last 5 years. The committee is HAPSI, better known as the Historic Architecture Preservation Committee, which was constituted by you, our city council, in 2008. HAPSI is here today to advise you on strategies to enhance our city's position with respect to preservation as preservation relates to our city's historic structures, landmarks, and districts, as well as designation methods for future landmark districts. There are three special elements I'd like to point out which contribute to making our city the notable and memorable place that it is today. First of all, I believe that we are an established, culturally diverse city noted for being founded in our country's early history. Secondly, we have a wealth of significant structures, neighborhoods, and districts which are the ambassadors representing these early periods of our history. And thirdly, we have a dynamic, historic downtown sited on a gorgeous working waterfront which celebrates these extraordinary times of our city. You may have noticed that each of the three special elements I just mentioned exist and are a part of what we are known for because of the reference to the momentous historic development that our city owns. HAPSI's work has been focused on developing the tools necessary for our city to retain and promote sustaining our historic resources. These tools, which will be introduced to you today, are pro-development tools both private and public enterprises can play with. Our Chapter 9 recommendations, in particular, guide future development interest on how to respect the rich cultural architectural offerings which are revealing the new creative development opportunities here in Norfolk. While Norfolk is seen in the eyes of others as a leader for many of the initiatives and accomplishments it has to date, preservation is one of the opportunities for the city to become a leader. Link city government to preservation and have preservation become an expectancy. With that said, and to help demystify some of the reservations and misperceptions surrounding preservation, I want to be clear on what our work is versus what it is not, with the notion of establishing an expectancy for preservation and linking this preservation to our city government policies. Firstly, our work is not preservation for the sake of preservation. It is about preservation for the right reasons and for retention of our heritage. Preservation does not bring limitations to development opportunities. It only enhances the sophistication of how these opportunities become realized. Secondly, our work is not about demolition or no demolition. It is about demolition as related to specific city and state governmental processes to ensure proper processes for the very permanent and unreversible act. Demolition is unreversible. Our Chapter 9 recommendations today should be thought of as an access portal. A portal or gateway to funding opportunities, partnering opportunities, and a gateway to establishing Norfolk as a leader in the realm of preservation and ultimately very sophisticated development patterns. With the acceptance of our recommendations here today, the following benefits will occur almost immediately. You might want to take pencil notes of these. Our city's historic district review processes will become simplified. All of our historic districts will be governed equally. We will change the character and authority of the current Design Review Committee to a decision-making architectural review board, and we will be prepared to apply for a certified local government status known as CLG. This status will allow us to become linked to a broader base of state and federal grant funding resources for special initiatives through the Virginia Department of Historic Resources and the U.S. Department of Interior. Currently, there are funding sources available to support flood protection initiatives in historic districts through the National Park Service, but only if we seek this status as a city will we be able to secure such funds. As a 30-year seasoned architect with a passion for modern architecture and contemporary patterns, I greatly appreciate the challenge of developing projects which have well-defined restraints and expectations within their given context. It is these very elements which produce the most intellectual results and contribute the highest to to the reservoir of our future inventory of historic resources. I'm not only passionate about architecture, but about the destiny of the city I live and work. I believe our committee has vetted very carefully a recommendation for you which represents best practices, as is evident through our recent recognition of our contribution to the 2030 Plan Norfolk, where we created a chapter dedicated to preservation titled Preserving Our Heritage. This is something the city has never had before. As HAPSI envisions today, it is a new day for our city that only good things could spin from acceptance of these recommendations. I want to thank you for your time, and especially want to thank Frank and his staff, and George, Lenny, Susan, and especially Adam for all of their extremely hard work, their research, patience, support, and guidance for our committee. We have received an education in the process of arriving at this place today and greatly appreciate all that we have learned and developing as a team of advisors to you. So with that said, Frank is going to give you an overview of the details of our recommendations, and I look forward to further discussion as well as what may come from the understanding as we all grow together with the need of the cities taking a stronger stance towards preservation. So,
Frank, just a second. Donna, do you want to acknowledge the folks who are here, who are on your committee?
Absolutely, yes. We have Greta Gustafson here, we have Paige Pollard, and we have Mark, and any other committee members? I believe that's
Mark
it.
Perot.
Mark Perot, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And, yeah, we do. As I understand, the presentation today will then be moved back to the Planning Commission for the purposes of a public hearing.
Yes, sir. If city council concurs, but the way the HAPSI was created, they make their report to you.
Right.
If city council concurs in their recommendations in whole or in part, that what you have directed would then be presented to the planning commission
Right.
to initiate text amendments that would then begin the public hearing process.
Okay, which would eventually come back
Which
to
would
us
come back to
vote
you.
up or down.
And about 4 or 5 months after today.
Okay, so we're not making decisions today. This just begins that decision-making process. Okay.
Correct.
Donna, thank you very much. The first few slides are really just a reorientation of what HAPSI was designed to do. As Donna indicated, the committee was created in 2008. It was specifically charged with developing ideas about how we could enhance our historic preservation programs, to review the programs and ordinances and policies that were in place, and look at how we could modify them to better protect some of the historic resources in Norfolk. The first year and a half that HAPSI was in existence, they developed some preliminary goals which were presented to the City Council Communities and Public Safety Committee back in 2010. And those issues were, they wanted to ensure that preservation was recognized in Plan Norfolk 2030, which has been done, as Donna indicated. They'd like to, in drafting the ordinances, try to ensure that Norfolk would qualify for certified local government standing, and they wanted to improve understanding of historic districts and the requirements for developing within them throughout the city. And so once the Council Committee ratified those 3 big goals, the next issue that HAPSI came up with was trying to look at how they could incorporate those into ordinance revisions for Chapter 9 of the zoning ordinance, which is our historic district ordinance. Again, the 3 things that became a priority for these zoning regulations were to qualify for CLG status, to establish a status for protecting individual properties, a historic landmark program as opposed to a historic district program, and to try to simplify the ordinance because, as I'm sure Donna, Paige, and Greta, who work within these ordinances all the time, will tell you, it is a little, what we have now is somewhat complicated. So it was, how do we make this simpler? Donna already touched on the issue of a certified local government. It really does not establish any more overview of the city. It does qualify us for funding programs that right now we don't qualify for, as well as some technical assistance that we can't get at this point. In order to do this, you have to have an architectural review board with real decision-making authority. Our current board that comes closest to this is the Design Review Committee, but they have no decision-making authority. So these were the two big issues that HAPSI was trying to deal with for the CLG status.
Frank, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
When you say decision-making authority, you mean similar to the planning commission,
Yes, sir.
that level?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Because anything would still be appealable back to city council. City council would continue to have that authority. If someone was aggrieved or did not like the decision, they'd have the ability to bring it to city council, just as is the case now.
Thank you.
And so HAPSI has recommended the creation of an architectural review board. Their recommendation is that this board be composed of a group somewhat similar to our current Design Review Committee. It's a little bigger than what is proposed for the Design Review Committee. What they're proposing is 6 professionals. And here we're talking about architects, landscape architects, historic preservation professionals as the types of professionals you'd be looking for. 2 people who live or own property in historic districts. Right now, the Design Review Committee is required to have 1, and then they wanted to try to strengthen the connection between the Planning Commission and the Architectural Review Board, so they are recommending 1 planning commissioner be designated as a member of the ARB.
Frank, is that required to get the designation to have the 1 planning commissioner, or is
No.
that just what they requested?
No, this was an idea of better communicating to the Planning Commission some of the issues that the ARB is dealing with, because right now, I think the Planning Commission at times gets frustrated that they don't understand some of the reasoning behind a decision, and it turns to staff or to the applicant to try to explain it. And the feeling was if the Planning Commission had a representative, you would strengthen that connection, there'd be improved understanding.
We don't have any other board or commission in which we have that kind of setup, do we?
Public Arts Commission. The Planning Commission has a member of the Public
Right.
Arts
Are
Commission.
they ex officio or are they voting?
Voting.
They're a voting member. And also, I would note that the Design Review Committee has a voting member on the Public Arts Commission. But that's the only board I'm aware of that does have that. And as I indicated earlier, the idea behind this is to give the ARB, that decision-making authority on certificates of appropriateness, the ability to take action within a historic district. And the advantage to this is it simplifies the process and reduces the number of meetings that an applicant for development in a historic district has to come to. Let me begin by saying that this has been reviewed with the Planning Commission, and they agree with this idea wholeheartedly. Planning Commission members have said over and over again they lack the expertise to second guess the Design Review Committee or the ARB if it's created on issues of historic preservation. They'd prefer to get out of the business in historic districts. And when city staff, when the city manager had city staff going out and meeting with developers, single biggest complaint we heard over and over again with our current process results in people having to go to Design Review and Planning Commission, then back to Design Review and back to Planning Commission, and they get frustrated because they're getting inconsistent direction from Design Review and Planning Commission on times. So what you're seeing here is all of these steps involving the Planning Commission would be eliminated. And so someone would go to ARB, which would have the ability to continue an item, deny it, or approve it. If it was approved or denied, they would then if it's approved, it's over unless someone appeals it. If it's denied, you would still have the ability to approve it or to appeal it back to City Council, as Mr. Riddick was asking about. Now, one of the other issues that was discussed in relationship to this was what do you do with projects that go to Design Review Committee right now that are not in historic districts? Well, HAPSI said they would yield on this issue to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission says they would like to continue to have a review process on those projects. And these would be the city projects outside of historic districts or projects on property acquired from the city that are not in a historic district. Planning Commission would like to remain involved in those because they feel that there is more leeway there. It is not simply complying with the design guidelines. Some of the other changes that were recommended by HAPSI in Chapter 9, I'm going to go through these in a little more detail, but you'll see that there are about 5 major areas dealing with landmarks, notice requirements, standards for demolition, extending the requirement for demolition into our historic overlays, and extending the right of appeal for the granting of a COA. The first one of these is the idea of a historic landmark. We have one property in Norfolk right now that is designated a historic district. It's a single property with a single structure on it, the Hodges House. It actually would make more sense as a historic landmark. It would still have the same level of protection, but it is just a more typical way of dealing with this kind of property. So the recommendation is to create this landmark designation, which would allow single sites or single structures to be designated. And that is a specific implementation action that was in Plan Norfolk 2030, is to look at developing a program for designation of single properties. The second issue that I mentioned is improving public notice. And this is an issue I think every member of council has at one point or another talked to me about. How can we improve notice of activity in historic districts? Well, what is proposed is that we post properties seeking a certificate of appropriateness in the same way that we post properties right now that are seeking a rezoning or a special exception, so neighbors are aware of what is being done. This would not in any way impact what we currently do online, which is post all of these applications with the complete file, but it would let adjacent property owners and interested parties know there's something to look for, something's coming. The next big issue, and this is one Donna touched on in her comments, is the idea of improving the standards for demolition in a COA, or in a historic district. And the reason for this is, as Donna indicated, demolition is irrevocable. So the standards that HAPSI has proposed creating look first at, is this a designated contributing structure in the district, or is it non-contributing? If it is non-contributing, the question then becomes, is the architecture unique? Is it unusual? What's the texture? How does it fit into the overall area around it? And once you've looked at those, then you begin looking at the issue of the viability of restoring the property or protecting it. And so for doing that, what you'd be looking for is an appraisal of the property, looking at the value of the land versus the value of the structure on it, getting some estimates of the cost to actually perform rehabilitation or restoration of the property if it's required, as well as looking at the structural condition of the property to ensure that what is being proposed will actually maintain the property. And only after doing that level of analysis would you then be able to proceed with a COA for demolition. And you do need to bear in mind that under Virginia law, if a COA for demolition is denied, that does not prevent demolition of the property. What it does is it delays demolition in order to give the public or adjacent property owners, other interested parties, an opportunity to try to acquire that property with the length of time demolition is delayed based on the value of the property. So most typically it's about a year that would be delayed.
Frank, I saw the numbers and the values assigned. Are those what you would, where do those numbers come from? Is that what you consider best practices, or is that a typical?
That's coming from the state.
Right,
Okay,
the
all right.
state.
This is Mr. Melita did research on this. This is lifted straight out of state statute, or where those numbers come from. And then the next item was an item, I'll be honest and tell you I had a lot of reservation about, because this is looking at a COA for demolition in our historic overlay districts. Right now, we require COAs for demolition in the designated historic districts, but not in historic overlays. The only historic overlay we have right now is downtown. This issue is required to attain CLG status. And when Donna and the members of HAPSI first talked to me about this, I said we need a lot more public outreach before we bring anything like this forward. And I am happy to say that working with HAPSI, working with DNC, the Downtown Norfolk Council, and the Downtown Norfolk Civic League, we have letters of support from both of those organizations as well as from the owners of most of the historic properties downtown, supporting the idea of a COA for demolition. So the concerns that I had on behalf of the administration have been resolved at this point based on that outreach. And then the last issue that is in the report deals with the general right of appeal. What happens if a COA is denied or granted? Right now, the ordinance only allows an applicant to appeal the denial of a
When you
COA.
say appeal, what do you mean?
If a COA is denied,
You can appeal to the city council.
that could be appealed to city council. But if a COA is approved and the neighbors don't like it or other interested parties disagree with it, there is no appeal. And this was a concern that was raised by the public. And I can't tell you how many meetings HAPSI went out and had, because they did have a number of public meetings on this issue. And overwhelmingly, the public was asking for this. I will also acknowledge that the neighborhoods and the organizations that have weighed in have unanimously indicated their support for this. And the reason they give is that it is consistent with what most Virginia historic localities do. They have a much broader right of appeal than we have. And so, with that, I'm going to wrap up with giving you, we've had lots of discussion within the administration about where we think we should be going with this. And the administration does support all of the recommendations made by HAPSI, with the exception of expanding the right of appeal. And the reason for that is we believe it is counter to what we are trying to do with expediting processes, streamlining what we do. So we would recommend leaving the right of appeal where it is today. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, or I will turn it back over to Donna and her colleagues on HAPSI to see if they can answer questions for you.
Right of appeal to who, Frank?
It would be to you.
And so you want to do what? Say that again.
HAPSI is recommending that that right of appeal be expanded so that anyone who is not pleased with the outcome of the certificate of appropriateness would have the ability to appeal to city council. The administration is concerned that seems to go against what we're trying to do with streamlining processes in order to deal with smarter processing.
Right, you said anybody who doesn't like the fact that we've allowed them to tear a building down, they wouldn't have to be connected or.
They're going to have to demonstrate some interest in the issue, but I'd have to defer to Mr. Melita or to Wayne as to exactly what that interest would have to be. I'm not the attorney, so I can't
The
answer.
court does have an opportunity to discount appeals that are,
Could there be multiple
Silly.
appeals? Could this person and that person and this person, I mean, you could.
Again, I'm going to have to defer to Mr. Melita on this one because you're venturing into the range of legal actions as opposed to policy issues.
That's what
Right,
staff
but
is
I am
recommending.
recommending-
HAPSI is recommending that they be allowed to appeal.
right, and I totally agree with that.
With what?
It's with allowing others to appeal a decision.
I do too.
It's consistent with what's done throughout
Design
Virginia.
review.
And you know, I'm totally in favor of expediting and smart processing. But the reason we're smart processing is for our citizens. And our citizens in these communities support this. And, you know, I think every citizen in our community deserves a right to have an opportunity to weigh in on this. And I think you have way overestimated how often this would happen. I understand no reason why we as a city should do this differently than all the other historic areas in Virginia.
Adam, you got something?
The right, just so everyone's clear for council, the right of appeal would not only be just to the city council, would be if satisfaction was not achieved at city council, the right of appeal would be to court. The question raised by Dr. Woodley's concern about how a court determines whether or not an appellant is aggrieved or has an interest in the decision is unfortunately a decision that is based on the facts and that would be determined at trial. So there's no way to close the courthouse doors to a possible appellant based on a judgment of whether or not they're grieved until you've had a trial. And so it effectively means that anybody has a right of appeal whether they're grieved or not. Whether they are successful or not, or the grounds upon which they are successful may depend on whether they're grieved. But it does not prevent anyone from bringing the appeal to you and to the circuit court or.
What would be the timing of somebody saying that they would like to appeal?
14 days to appeal to council, and then by statute, I believe they have 30 days to appeal to circuit court.
So they get to do that anyway? Is that what you're saying?
Under current ordinance, only the applicant can do that for due process
Only the-
reasons. A
And
denial.
if you lose,
So it could be a neighbor that is not happy with the COA, and they can
Right,
appeal.
but let me, for someone, I mean, I looked at the ordinance for, I mean, the one that you proposed, where it says aggrieved person. And the lawyer in me wants to find what that means, aggrieved person. Is that a property owner within the historic district? Is it somebody who lives within the historic district? Or is it somebody in Kansas who, is a fan of historic preservation and is, or is it just a retired, is it a lawyer who lives in Virginia Beach who's mad at the property owner and wants to tie the stuff up? I mean, is there a standing issue anywhere in this?
It is exactly a standing issue, and the Virginia Supreme Court's definition of aggrieved is a pretty low standard. It's any person who can demonstrate a pecuniary interest in it. So it may be.
Pecuniary interest.
It may be the landlord of a property that's 2 streets over that lives in Texas
Okay,
that owns a piece of property in
Well,
Norfolk.
I get that. I mean, I think that's, even for me, that would be an aggrieved person. But if it was somebody who lived in another city, who didn't have, who would say was a fan of historic preservation and didn't like the way we were doing things, does that fit the definition of aggrieved?
It probably would not, of course, the
Okay.
court decides. There's
Should
generally no
we take a shot
taxpayer standing.
at defining who an aggrieved person is?
I think we could tighten that up a
I
little
mean,
bit.
just so whether it's somebody who lives within
Why
the
are we
historic
different than
district or.
Harrison?
And that's what some
Why are we
localities
gonna have more
done.
trouble than Alexandria's having?
Because we're smarter.
No, I'm saying, why are we having more trouble
Oh.
than Alexandria's having?
Alexandria
Well, I
does
don't-
exactly that. They have a petition process, and unless there are a certain number of petitioners, then it doesn't cross the threshold of being of a concern for locality. And then the appellant has to be a signatory to the petition. I think their standard is 25 signatories, but they have a threshold where they measure the amount of neighborhood interest there is in challenge.
Does that still go to the courts in Alexandria? You have to have 25 people come in and say, we're.
Correct, that would be to get past the threshold of appealing. Virginia law allows localities to set whatever appeal standard they want, provided that the property owner can appeal.
Seems to me we ought to have some standard in here other than just quote aggrieved person, even if we want to consider an appeal, which administration is not recommending. Rather than argue the thing right now, I mean, shouldn't we just let the process go down to the planning commission? And then let them come through and see what the public hearings say and then come back to us?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Good.
Let me just say that I am not in favor of the city council giving up its ability for the appeal to come to us. So,
I agree with that. I
yeah,
think that's what we're.
yeah, and so that's what I want, so I don't know where the administration comes in, but I just want to state my position that I want to have the ability to handle an appeal if a citizen wants to appeal or property owner wants to appeal.
That is the way it is structured, but as Mr. Melita has indicated, someone who is unhappy with the council decision on an appeal would then have the ability to take that appeal into, take on an appeal into court.
The purpose of the design review board was downplayed when this presentation started. Can you go back through and explain to me again the purpose of the design review board? Because it's my understanding they have other authority, such as in East Beach, with their listed in that document that we created over in the new, that some of that goes to the design review board. So it's not just public property.
It is, the two biggest areas where they come into play are in public property that other than in historic districts. I would say the vast majority of what Design Review Committee deals with are in historic districts. And then the other areas are public property, property acquired from the city, NRHA property, Alva Public Schools property, and then there are some other areas where by ordinance, it would go to the Design Review Committee, and in addition, the Planning Commission has the authority to refer any project to the Design Review Committee, just as City Council could refer a project to the Design Review Committee.
I've already expressed my concern to some HAPSI members. I don't really have an issue with the creation of an ARB. My issue is with the diversity of the group. And when I look at the historical HAPSI,
What they
where-
recommended.
where they come from in the city. And when I look at HAPSI now, the majority of the members come from your ward.
Historic.
Right, historic wards. And so my concern is that this, if we merge these together, that we lose the diversity of our,
We would reappoint
right,
to make,
Not
to
merging.
get what you're trying to get.
right, I understand that. So when they started that presentation, it said 6 professionals, 2 historical, and then 1 planning commissioner. And since they're gonna be taking over the responsibilities of design review, because that's going away with this, right? I'm assuming design
Within
review
these
is,
districts, right?
You could still continue to have a separate design review committee for projects outside of historic districts. That would be another option.
right. I don't think it's necessary to keep the design review. What my concern is making sure that we get representation from all over the city now that they're gonna be making. I don't want it to be the ARB of downtown Norfolk making decisions on public property down in Ocean View. I respect their professionalism and where they come from, but there is a different way of doing business sometimes with downtown and projects in Ocean View. We have a lot of public property for sale in Ocean View, right? The things that come up. I just want to make sure that we have just like our planning commission, we try to make sure that we have a diverse representation from across the city, just as much as anywhere else in the city. And so my concern would be that when we make this transition, that we have some kind of language in there, or I don't want it to just say 6 professionals. I know it's up to this council to make sure that those 6 professionals are diverse, but I need some kind of indication that will happen, that there will be representatives from all over, which right now the design review board does have. It has a different group of people.
And
We
that's-
also
that's-
had asked for the last 4 years for other appointments to HAPSI because there were vacancies. And I wish you had at that point brought up some folks from Ocean View because we were asking you for the board to do that.
We have,
I know,
Gail
I'm just
Hagan
saying, at
is,
no point
you
did
know,
HAPSI,
interested in.
did we say we only wanted
Right.
downtown
No, I know
people.
that.
I asked city council to come up with other appointments and those weren't forthcoming. So
And-
I don't
and-
think
and-
we ever made any attempt to
Sure.
restrict that.
And what I'm saying, the same thing I've pinned down. If we replace design and review, then we should reappoint the new group to ensure diversity. And, because, if you say, you could end up with what's called a friendship team. And that's not what I'm looking for. I just don't want an entire group who believes that they know all about preservation, I'm looking for diversity.
When you said we, you meant the council, right? I mean, that's.
Yeah, we as a council asked for 4 years for appointments, and I was very disappointed that we didn't get more. So I really think we made every effort to make this as diverse and both ethnically and.
The last time we did
district.
this was when I first got
Why
on
isn't
council.
Adam
And
Adam
I,
Didn't we?
Grimes
Tommy,
up here.
every time we brought
My
it up,
hero.
we said we have a full board.
these people have been on here since I've been on
But,
council.
right, but that's not a full board. We have several
I didn't-
vacancies.
Okay.
Okay.
We bring
okay,
it up
I think
every
we're
time,
fine.
right?
We got it.
Right,
We
right.
got it.
Planning is gonna bring it back.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
you're absolutely right about we need that. But I would hope in the future that you would bring forth some people throughout our community that we can
Well,
add to this.
I'm learning people that are in my community that would be interested in serving on HAPSI. I find them every day. I'm making a list for you, Terry.
All right, next.
All right,
What's
okay.
next?
First, Donna, thank you
Yes.
for the, first of
Thank
all,
you.
great introduction.
Thank
Thanks for the good work. I never knew there was something called a certified local government place we could go get money, so that'd be good.
And it's really important we have that designation, because that would be huge for the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
In Just a couple of comments before the next thing. We were planning on having our legislative dinner on the night of the 29th. Turns out that's the same night that the Access College Foundation is having its 25th anniversary dinner. And I think we're all invited to that. That's going to be a big event over at the Marriott. I mean, and that's really worth supporting. They've been in our schools for 25 years now. And so we're working on a couple of other dates for that dinner, and I think the General Assembly folks probably would opt to be at the Access dinner rather than be with us, quite honestly. So we're
The
looking
feeling's
at
mutual.
November, Bryant, November 19th, and there are a couple of dates which we'll work with you there, so you can make plans if you want to be at the Access College Foundation
Already
dinner.
regretted it because of that. Are we gonna get a table there? Or we just gonna do
I
it?
think we'll get a table. The administration's gotten a table.
Okay, because I had regretted it based on the fact that we had that. November 19th,
Yeah, Brian, what, Brian?
It's either, most optimal dates would be Tuesday the 19th or the 20th. There's a question about your schedule on Tuesday night that I haven't had a chance to confirm.
So
you're
one of
gonna
those
let us
days.
know, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but
So
we
then-
scratch the other one off and you'll
Yeah.
contact us.
The 19th was originally a night council meeting?
Well, in the original calendars, it was a work session, but
Right.
if we're moving to 2 voting meetings a month, the 19th would be one of those voting meetings.
Okay.
So that's the rub right now.
Right, that's what I'm looking at on that.
So
We-
the
we-
19th of what?
It was moved to a voting night because we needed to have 2 a month, or we.
Involves the 12th, right?
Yes.
We have met more times than we need to meet, actually, right?
You have
One
an
more?
extra one.
Extra
Yes.
one, okay. The nomination deadline for the SIPSM board membership is next week, right? Is the 15th. And so Don Williams has agreed to be recommended. He used to be on the SIPSM board. And, but we need a couple more names just to make recommendations. The governor can decide, I think, whoever he wants to serve on the board. But hope
How long
is that he
the
would.
term? 2 years? 4 years?
4 years. Yeah, Joe Leaf has decided he didn't want to be reappointed, but I mean, if they would appoint Don is a great representative. He knows some of the problems he used to chair the board. But if anybody has any other ideas about people, somebody with an engineering background might be good, if you know anybody who, or a builder.
I
I mean,
think
I
if
don't know.
Don wants that punishment, he deserves it.
Yeah, but didn't you used to serve on the
I
SIPSM board?
did. It's punishment.
That's what I was going to say. I think we ought
I think you're trying to get off
nominate
of it,
Mickey
though.
Mouse and
I'm
Goofy or
nominating
something.
Mr. Riddick. It can't be,
What's the time commitment on that? Just so if I talk to anybody about it.
I'll find that out.
I'm on the board now, so I can say.
but it's a big deal.
It meets once a month, usually the meetings are about 2 hours. There's only one committee, that's the executive committee, so if anyone's in the leadership, then that's the additional meetings. For the most part, the work that's associated with it can be done in those meetings.
And what is this, do we need to act on the recommendation for the Civil Service Commission appointment?
There was a question about where she lived, and she lives in Norfolk, and so next week, if we could
Okay,
move that ahead.
all right, Anna Smith lives in Norfolk. And that's who, okay,
We had circulated her resumes.
okay. I guess that's it. All right, Mr. Manager, the HRSD?
Yes.
You may recall Kristen gave you an overview of the HRSD, the Hampton Roads Sanitation District's consolidation study several months ago. What she's here to do today is give you the conclusions of the study, the administration's recommendations with regards to the study. There was also communication from Lori last week that you may have seen, but she's here today to answer any of your questions and give you a brief overview.
Good afternoon. This presentation is intended to update you on the Regional Wastewater System Consolidation Study that was managed by Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, as well as tell you about a new idea for a hybrid system that's a partial wastewater system regionalization. And we're not requesting any council action at this time. When the the regional wastewater system regionalization study was begun, there were three important assumptions. And one was that all the localities would turn over their wastewater system assets to HRSD at no cost. Another was that HRSD would assume the debt, the wastewater debt of all the localities. And the final one was that HRSD would develop one regional rate that would be charged to all the localities. As the study was completed last month, it was clear that it would be a significant savings in capital improvements to the system if they were done as a region rather than each entity making improvements to their system. The study also found that the existing legal authority is adequate for regionalization if it was determined that that's what everyone wanted to do. In quantifying the savings for the entire region, we're looking at in the vicinity of a net present value over 30 years of about $948 million. And that varies among localities. For Norfolk, we're looking at around $200 million, but that doesn't account for a number of costs that the city would have, including the general fund impact of loss of return on investment, and I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. And it should be noted, too, that when we give these numbers like 948 million and 201 million, it may give you a false sense since there's a significant margin of error in these numbers. It became clear when this report was moving to finalization that a number of localities, really all the localities, would have some significant concerns with regionalization. And most of the member localities don't support outright consolidation of the system. A big concern is the loss of return on investment, payment in lieu of taxes, and general allocations. And for Norfolk, we're talking about $3 million a year. So that would mean that if the system were regionalized and there were one rate, Norfolk would have to place a surcharge on the regional rate in order to recover those monies. All of the localities would be faced with stranded assets that are also not included in those savings numbers, facilities and equipment that would not be turned over to Hampton Roads Sanitation District.
Can I ask you, who?
Sure.
The HRSD board has always been sort of a mystery to me.
Yeah.
The governor appoints the board, right?
Yes.
We had no at one time he appointed Rich Conklin, who was heading Nauticus. It becomes, they set rates, they do all of that stuff, and they really have very little relationship with us. I've never met the director of HRSD. I've never, they do their own thing. We don't have any. We can't represent our citizens with them. The board, they don't, as far as I can tell, they don't really care what we think.
They've never asked, have they?
Huh?
They've never asked.
And I want you to go through this, but I know that you thought this wasn't a good idea financially, but from just a governance standpoint, to put that sort of authority in their hands with no relationship with us is, I wouldn't go along with that, even if the numbers helped us, unless we had a different feeling about it.
Can I ask one question? I know you're probably going to answer this question in a minute, but you mentioned if we went with them, we'd have to put a surcharge on would that surcharge have the possibility of increasing over a period of time of the contract? Or we could say if we did it would remain constant for 30 years, or would we have to increase it?
It would be totally up to City Council. HRSD would impose a regional rate, and if we wanted to have some sort of recovery of return on investment, payment in lieu of taxes, that would be up to you. You could set the amount, and you could take it away anytime you want.
So would that be another line on your public service bill?
Yes, sir.
That we're already getting complaints about?
Yes.
I think we just lost them all.
You lost your slide ago.
As for the HRSD board, our representative is Michael Glenn, and he and I talk on Mike Glenn of Luna
Engineer?
Development. No, he's a developer.
He was on HAPSI. He's on HAPSI.
Is it?
And we do talk on some regular basis.
Well, I remember, this is a side point, but just a story. I mean, we were trying to build Powhatan Field. I mean, all we wanted was a couple feet of their property to put a fence on. And after months and months of negotiations, as I recall, they said no. I mean, even when we were building the park, I mean, they were not, I mean, they had a whole field out there, and the whole idea is, well, maybe someday we're gonna have to park cars there. You know, and so we had to tighten the field up, put the stands. These guys don't care about us. I mean, and there's no indication that they ever did care about the citizens of Norfolk, in my opinion. Remember that, Paul?
I do.
I mean, it was, I don't know if anybody's around here who helped build the park. John, you remember that, right? Kuiper trying to get them to help us, we just wanted a few feet, you know. Anyway.
Some of the other concerns of the localities are that lack of flexibility regarding economic development, concerns that a regional entity might not provide the level of customer service that our residents have become accustomed to. We baby them. And we already talked about uneven distribution of projected savings and margin of error, and also the proposed governance of this fully regionalized wastewater system was one representative per locality, and surely that favors small localities. In the discussions of these concerns that the localities would surely have, another idea came forward that we think has some merit. And it's for what we're calling a hybrid alternative, which we would capture the capital cost savings for the region, which are important, without many of the issues that would be of concern to the localities. And how it would work is Hampton Roads Sanitation District would be responsible for the capacity of the system, the entire system, to handle wet weather events. But the localities would retain ownership, operation, and maintenance of their collection systems. And Hampton Roads Sanitation District would make whatever improvements were needed to the system, whether they're in the localities or HRSD's facilities, at their own expense. And if those facilities are in the localities, they would give those improvements to the localities at no cost to the locality. And the governance of HRSD would not change. Hampton Roads Sanitation District Commission has given its general manager the approval to discuss this partial regionalization or hybrid model with the regulators. And if the regulators are amenable to the concept, it's very likely that they'll request letters of intent from the localities that are involved and HRSD so that we could work out the details before, and the regulators would give us some extra time for that. And of course, we would update City Council on the discussions as they move forward. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Is this something that we would vote on as to whether we want to participate in either one of them?
Absolutely.
Would a consortium potentially move forward without one or two of the
I mean, we
municipalities?
vote if we wanted to go in, we don't have to.
But we don't have to go
Exactly.
in, but what I'm
Exactly.
saying is if
Manage.
4 or 5 of them go and 1 or 2 not, or have them in.
Yes, and it's my understanding there may be 1 or 2 localities that are interested.
What I'm reading,
The full consolidation, almost all the member localities have written to HRSD in opposition to full consolidation since the outcome, since the finalization of the study.
By the way, I remember what it was. We wanted to drive some buses. John, remember?
We would still get them with
We
partial.
wanted a driveway behind the stands so the visiting team could drive their bus down to their locker room, that we could service the facility from the back. And they wouldn't agree to that. Just let us build a driveway. You could own the property. And they wouldn't even agree to that. So there, I got a grudge against them. Okay.
okay,
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
that's it?
Okay.
Wait a
You want to do council interest before you leave? You got anything, Mr. Riddick?
Yeah, one thing I have,
Let's don't blow it.
over in Berkeley, the police department's doing a very good job of trying to handle Walker Avenue, where it's a big headache. But over in the 1000 block of Grayson Street, got a call from Mr. Ted Lewis, and they just need to see some visibility over there. And then I have this I want to pass to you. Okay. That's all I have.
Okay.
I add to that one, Mr. Riddick.
And
Yes,
don't-
sir.
Don't anybody leave, because we got to vote on the closed meeting that we didn't vote on last week.
I just have one thing,
I
we
was
got,
adding to Mr. Riddick, over in Berkeley, off Liberty Street, with some of the terraces, the young men kind of, they lauder right there, we call it the spotlight, but Liberty Street where some of the terraces and that area where the park is.
that's all about when
Yeah, well, right up the street from Wynn Nursery, yeah. I really need to get right there out there in the morning, you know.
Yeah, we had-
rocket scientists to figure out what they're doing out
Yeah,
there.
we had about 9 officers at the task force meeting this month. The chief came last month, and some of the tariffs was brought up, and they are on top of that.
Okay,
On
excellent.
top of that.
only thing I have is, I don't know what we all did, this update from the Hampton, or I guess a recap of Hampton Road's partnership on the shared services project, and now that there is no more such a group, Marcus, are we gonna still continue to move? How are we gonna go on this shared service? We made great progress, the first round, we saved a lot of money, and what's next?
Sure. The city manager of Chesapeake and Virginia Beach and I have sat down and talked. We talked as recently as week before last to go with phase 2, and phase 2 would be not necessarily looking at the remaining items on the list, but now that we have some victories, let's open it up once again to see every
What is gonna be the
possibility.
conduit for that? Who's
We,
gonna
we want to do
do
this.
it ourselves?
No, the same process. We bring in the private sector.
I understand, but there's no more Dana and that group, that's gone.
We're going to seek some financial support outside of just local government.
All right, I just don't want to let it, we did a lot of good things, we had a lot of meetings, I just don't want to let it go. It's the future.
We won't let it go.
Just really quickly, as I brought up at the retreat, for our legislative agenda, I would really like this community to consider changing our school boards to 4 years. I did some more research. You had asked. The only other community that has a 2-year board tenure is Fairfax County. We used to have 4-year tenures. We changed it during integration because of that, and I'd really like us once again to think about that. Secondly, we were supposed
So
to.
is that on our list, or, yeah?
Well,
It
we
is?
kind of just left it. I mean, when we brought it up at retreat,
No,
so
I
we
think you said we would
didn't
talk
really
about it some
decide.
more.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give that.
Isn't Fairfax moving to an elected school board? Isn't there an effort there to get away anyway?
And then.
I mean, I could argue either side of that issue, but I don't know. What do I'm not, but okay, go ahead, Terry, I'm sorry.
I just, very quickly, I hate to keep dragging this through, and truly, if you guys just want this to die, let us know, because we're just dragging this along, this thing about what we're doing with our committees and commissions, because we were supposed to talk about it at our next work session, that would be today.
Well,
Can we do it, our next one?
Yeah,
I mean, if
we-
seriously, if you guys don't want to do it, if you just don't have any energy, let us know. But let's not keep dragging this out.
Okay, we'll let you know. But it seems to me there are 3 issues. I mean, it seems like there are at least 3 of them. There's
Just
the
let me know when
manager's,
you'll let me know.
there's the manager's recommendation, there's the Terry and Tom recommendation, Tommy and Terry recommendation.
The
and
Ts.
The
TNT.
TNTs, and there is the do nothing camp,
I like to
which
do
is
nothing.
where Mr. Riddick and maybe some people are. So we'll work it out by the next session. We'll have it on there. Okay.
We get back to it, Terry.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's waterboard torturing.
We got a couple of things. One, James, the administration is real good. I get a lot of calls often from social workers or within the city, persons that used to work with Human Services who work with other companies now that service clients in our city. And James was very instrumental in helping one family. We had one family, grandmother taking care of 6 kids, and daughter, her grandkids. The daughter died having the last child, and she's raising 6 kids. These slum lords, absentee landlords, we got a lot of citizens that are at the mercy of these landlords. They don't have a voice. They're afraid to voice their opinion because they don't want to get put out where they already are. They have nowhere else to go. James was very instrumental in helping his family get the necessary services and putting shelter because she was one day away from having 6 kids out on the street. When I was out in Ocean View the other day, I noticed we had a lot of families off some of those back streets that, fit that same mold. I haven't given those. I know we can't fix everybody's problems, but within our city, I do think that we have a responsibility. If landlords are going to operate, that we have somebody to go out and check these units to make sure that they are inhabitable for citizens to be able to live in or raise families. Oftentimes, they don't do nothing, and that's to the detriment of this community as a whole. So I hope we can, I don't know, the code folk should be checking areas like, I know that we normally check when we get a call, but it'd just be nice to be able to go out and just look in some of these fragile areas and take an inventory and be able to bring some of these units up to code or put a fire to some of these absentee landlords.
Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed in the meeting today. With all the pressing issues that we have in the city, we come down here and meet for an hour. And I think the topics that we discussed today, there's so much more that we could discuss. I don't know who set the agenda for today. And it's an inconvenience for those of us who have jobs. I mean, I know I ran for office and I wanted to do this, but I've said this before, that if we're gonna come down here, make it meaningful and make it productive. But we're getting ready to dismiss. And I just feel like I set my schedule based off of the fact that we'd be here for 2 or 3 hours. I have other meetings downtown, so I'm gonna sit here for 2 more hours waiting because I'm not going to drive all the way home. So we have other presentations that have been canceled because we didn't have time because we were in closed session. Couldn't we have brought some of those presentations up instead of just meeting for an hour?
Well,
they were
I
important
think this is
presentations.
an anomaly today. I mean,
This is the first time we've gotten out in an hour in 14 years.
That's what but then why did we meet? Why
A
couldn't we?
couple people didn't.
I know, that's my concern too, is that maybe they looked at the agenda and saw that there was nothing really going on.
Typically
I
are
don't
here till
know.
at least 5 o'clock.
I know.
I mean, that's where we were the
Never get out
last,
this early.
and it's, we just came out of a city council retreat.
Every 2 days.
So why we meet? Why do we meet?
Well, we
The
have,
people on
we're
Hapsey is pretty
required.
important.
Yeah,
but-
Dr. Wibley wanted us to meet.
Yeah, but we could have done that the next meeting. I'm just saying, there's other things that we could have discussed. I'm not trying to whine. I'm just saying, make this time, if we're gonna come down here, not all of us live downtown and commute downtown. Make it meaningful and worth the time that we come down here. It's out of respect to our schedules, especially those that have full-time jobs and are working. We don't have the flexibility to just give up an hour to come down for a meeting and then go back to work.
Okay, well, I hear you. He said it's the first time in 14 years we've had an hour meeting.
I'm actually pretty
you know,
happy.
you know.
But I mean,
A couple of things. Thursday night, if you want to come, the Committee on Poverty Reduction is holding a town hall meeting in Huntersville. I don't know how many of y'all actually saw that, Ed, but I think it starts at 6. Don't know how many people will be there, but there are 3 town hall meetings that have been scheduled.
What's the top,
But
what are they coming to speak about?
on,
But I mean, just in general,
just-
come up
I mean-
and talk about poverty?
if they've got some thoughts about things that are, influencing their ability to get out of poverty.
just on time.
Okay.
Call roll.
And the meetings last for 2.5 hours, the ones they're having. They start at 5:30 and they go to 8 o'clock. I mean, there's some of the presentations from the members are happening, So it's a committee that's functioning, and people like Suzanne Purrier and, Thaler, and I mean, it's,
Where's the
These
meeting?
guys.
You said Huntersville, but what?
it's in the multipurpose center.
8:30 Goff Street.
Said
6
one
to 7.
scheduled
6
for
to
the
8:30.
Preble Library.
Yeah.
And
And
the,
the,
do we
Southside
wear our
Aquatic
bathing
Center.
suits to the aquatic center
I
on
think
the
you should.
17th?
I think you should.
That'll scare them away. I'm speaking for myself.
There's one other thing that, I don't know if this got anybody's attention, but the ambassador from Afghanistan is going to be speaking at the World Affairs Council event at the MacArthur Memorial at that, new visitor center there next week on the 10th. I don't know how many of you people that even care about that, but that's a lot of interesting things happening in our city, and we got the ambassador from Afghanistan in the United States coming to speak here. I thought was interesting. Also, next week on the 8th, Tuesday night, the 8th, we have a council session. But at the same time, one of the premieres of the movie, Captain Phillips, which is getting apparently great reviews. Maybe it might get some awards, is going to be here, and I don't know who's going to be here that night, but Captain Phillips. But if you remember, we did a big event for him right after the ending of the piracy piece, and so
I think it starts at 7 though or something.
Yeah, it does start at 7. But I'm told by winter there's some things we have to do that evening. So it might be an hour meeting, Tommy. It might just last for an hour, but.
He's still new.
In any event, Mr. Burford may have to chair that meeting.
We actually have a lot of formal meetings, actually. We have a lot of formal.
And look, I was, Chief, I was at the Middletown Arch, had a nice community event Saturday, and some of your police officers were there sitting behind a table, IDing people and stuff. And they were in jeans and sweatshirts, and I asked them, went up and spoke to them, and they said, well, that's what the young people in the community had asked them to wear at the event. They were also eating hot dogs and everything, but I really thought that was a good move. They were trying to create a relationship with some of the kids there in Middletown Arch, and your guys stepped down, and I thought they took it upon themselves to do that, and I thought that was a good move. And one of the ladies, one of the officers explained to me what they were doing. I thought that was really, I thought that was exactly what you would want out of them anyway, so. Okay, Breck, we're gonna do the.
A resolution certifying a closed meeting of the Council of the City of Norfolk held in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Adopt the resolution. Mr. Burford? Aye. Mr. Protiero? Who's not here? Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel?
Aye.
Dr.
What was
Whibley?
Aye.
Ms. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Wynn?
Aye.
Mr. Frame?
Aye. Okay. All right, we're gonna stand adjourned. Barkley, is that your new thing?
Is there any impact from the government shutdown on